Welcome back to Fast Hit Performance then. Who's the doctor they told you to go see? Dr. FJP, and I am back in session bringing you the medication for the nation as we talk about aviation. And today we're going to talk about a CRJ-900 airliner that crashed at Toronto Pearson International Airport. You know that was slick. That was slick as a mother hubbard. You know it. I might even try that again. You know what I'm saying? I am on fire. Which is pretty ironic, really, because it's exactly what happens to this airline, unfortunately. Look, there were no deaths here. 80 people on board. I think around about 20 injuries. An incredible piece of film. Filmed from the inside of another airline that's waiting to get airborne. We're going to look at the film. Then we're going to look at a newspaper article, and I'm not going to really take this apart and digest this like other channels have done, because I don't think that's important. I think it's pretty obvious what happened here. We will go into it, but we're going to look at the culture behind this particular airline. I think you're going to find it quite interesting.
Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Oh, no.
That is a you are taxiing back to the gate moment. Look, that's pretty horrendous. It's not a great thing to see, guys. Don't get me wrong. Aviation incidents, mishaps, accidents, they do happen. I, obviously in my career, witnessed enough of those in my time. But I really want to dig into something that's quite important to me, and that is culture. We can play this back at half speed, but one of my students is actually a pilot of this particular kind of aeroplane. It's amazing, and he came out with a few things here. And one of the things he said that the CRJ here actually loses a bit of aileron stability. There's a big crosswind here, guys. Actually, on approach, the aircraft was being flown by a company called Endeavour, subsidiary of Delta. As I said, it was at Toronto Pearson International Airport. Now, this is runway 23. As again, other channels have really taken us apart. The wind, though, was 270, 23 knots, so 40 degrees to the right off this particular thing, and gusting up to 33 knots. That was the call they got from air traffic. Now, at height, of course, it's a bit more powerful, the wind, and it's a bit more from the beam. So they will be angled down into wind the whole way. And at the end stage, what you really need to do is lift that wing up and straighten that nose. And that didn't happen because we see that the right wing, right undercarriage, impact that runway first. Now, this looks like the first officer flying this, and I will tell you why that's relevant in a minute. Let's press play, and I'll explain what my student said. So I've muted the film now, coming down, nice steady approach. The whole approach was exceptionally steady the whole way down. The problem is, we're just going to pause it when we look at this. See that winglet on the aircraft there? That's a little thing that helps reduce the drag on the end of what we call the main plane or the main wing. Now, the problem with the winglet on the RJ is it can actually blank the aileron a little bit, especially in crosswinds, and this has got a big crosswind here. They would be flying with the wings slightly down to one side as they come in into wind, and need to pick that wing up and need to straighten that jet out as it comes to the runway. There's also should be a perceptible bit of flare, like you lift the nose up just to arrest the rate of descent as we come down. Now, military aircraft like the Hornet landing on a carrier doesn't need to do that, but in airliners, they're really heavy, and if they don't do that, we can actually damage them quite significantly. So you see constant rate descent, no flare at all, no flare, blown snow across the runway, impacts there. And that looks to me like a whole world of snow. It could also be fuel from a ruptured wing. And the fuel tanks are in the wings, of course. And when the main spar goes, that wing is going to literally remove itself from the aircraft. Now, the problem is the left wing, which is still attached to the fuselage, is going to act as a huge amount of lift. That fire's coming out the right hand down the side of the fuselage. All the fuel's being spread down. Luckily, not a great deal of fuel on board. But that left wing is still producing lift, and it's going to rotate itself over, which is what's going to invert the aircraft. It also turns 180 degrees and ends up pointing out the wrong way. This is why you wear your seatbelts, guys, and you listen to people down the back end. This was a crew of 4, a captain, a first officer, and there was 2 flight attendants down the back who did an amazing job at getting these people out from an inverted position. Did they even train for that? That is crazy. Such great skills. I think someone's getting an award for this one. I don't think it's the pilots, though. There we go. The jet then is there. And, of course, from when all sudden motion ceases from my military training, that's when you start getting out. The problem, one of the biggest hazards we have in this commercial aviation aviation is from smoke and fumes. So I would just say, listen to what people tell you. But if people are getting their luggage out when you are vacating an aircraft like this, that's what your starboard pane piston is for. Boom! None of that, mate. We're getting the family out, all right? Dragging the little kids out with us, getting off. We're not collecting our belongings, are we? Because we're not idiots. Now, I was going to talk about this from a diversity point of view. And really, I know you're going to be a bit upset, but just stick with me a little bit. It's more about a culture point of view. The Daily Mail's jumped on this with both feet, and I don't think it's actually got the right line here. So we're going to cover it a little bit, and I'm just going to talk to you about the problems we have, unfortunately, with a lot of virtual signaling people in senior positions in meritocratic hierarchical organizations. A bit of a mouthful there, isn't it, really? But Endeavour Air slammed for DEI obsessed social media after Toronto plane crash. One of the reasons you don't do this is because guys like me will talk about it and it will make you look really silly. This actual article then goes into a lot of that social media side of things, which is a bit of a shame, really, because I don't think we necessarily need to. And of course, the conspiracy theories are abound. It's saying from this source that it was a woman in the right-hand seat who was the handling officer at the time, so the pilot who was actually flying the airplane. And on this dispatcher's release note, then is these the first names. If you are someone who knows this information, then write in the comments. We've got the pilot in command as James, the first officer as Kendall, and then the flight attendants as Holly and Rebecca. It's strange that they're using first names. Fair enough. I guess that's what you have to do nowadays. But what they are saying about this Kendall person is that she is a young woman, newly qualified and in the right hand seat. But to me, that means nothing. The captain is responsible for the safe conduct of this aeroplane, and if this first officer was to fly into the ground, roll over on top of itself, the captain is still responsible. However, this does bring us on to talking a little bit about diversity. So it was a Delta subsidiary. It was flight 4819. They do celebrate women and they do celebrate minorities in this airline quite a lot. Not only Delta, but also in Endeavour. And I would just say this is quite an interesting sort of picture that what happens when you do not concentrate on your core tasking. I've said it before, if there's any doubt, get out. And one of the things you'll see on other people's channels who do a really good job of breaking this down, there's a crosswind showing. They actually landed quite short on the runway, which makes me think they weren't actually flaring. Now, blown snow across the runway can actually make you think that you're slightly higher than you are, so you may actually kind of flare a little bit late. The flare is where we just arrest the rate of descent of the aircraft itself. And I'll show you a film now of a Hawk doing this on my website, where we actually sometimes drive that Hawk into the runway that I was an instructor on, because we want to break the surface tension of any fluid that happens to be on it. Here on my website then we can see this Hawk coming in with a crosswind, and they just literally drive it into the runway, break the surface tension. We don't want to be flaring in these little light aircraft, and there's obviously the brake parachute. We've got to try and keep ourselves solid on the runway as well. And here's the website of the airline itself. It actually talks about the flight here. It's offered, I think, $30,000 for each passenger. But let's go for the About Us page, shall we? Look at the missions and values, and very quickly we start to see a very inclusive policy. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. We'll scroll down, missions, values, all this kind of stuff. We start getting into a little bit about diversity then. But one of the things that we do have, look at careers, we click on all these links here. It talks about, you'll see a lot of diversity. You'll see a lot of women. You'll see a lot of diverse women, except when you go to our leaders page. And then, of course, like many companies that we'll talk about in a second, that diversity doesn't really follow it into the C-suite. And we have two women there, and the two women there are important. I'll tell you why now. Because Goldman Sachs, who's just axing its diversity rule that has served its purpose, because obviously Goldman Sachs are here to make us all aware of what we should be doing. This is obviously what we're living in now. It's awful. Has said that the bank ditched an internal diversity rule that barred it from advising all male, all white boards on company flotations because it was no longer needed. Listen to this next bit then. Basically, it said the investment bank had pledged that it would only help a business sell its shares on the stock exchange if it had two board members that satisfied diversity requirements, one of whom had to be a woman. So we can see them. It doesn't apply to the C-suite. It only applies to those people at the bottom. And we're going to stack it full of diversity. Now, there comes a problem with this. Delta, who obviously were employing this airline to do routes for them, are obviously massively into this diversity, equity, inclusion. I remember this from a while back. In fact, I made a video, and I'll just put that video up over here somewhere for you. I'll put like a little thing up. I'll put the link in the first one. You can have a look at that if you want to. It talks a lot about these airlines stacking people with diversity. I think it's disgraceful, really, because of course where I come from, which is a military structure, it was a meritocratic hierarchical based organization. There was no place for people that weren't actually good enough. And I'm not saying that women or minority candidates are not good enough. But I will just point you into this film by Jordan Peterson, who describes why, when you start selecting from a pool of people, as they've done here at Delta, and they start having all these quotas like the Royal Air Force had to make sure that we're closing the gap on progress, that we're bringing the correct people in, our core goals on racial equality, on sexual equality, and all this kind of goals here. When you start doing this, you don't then select the best people. And I'll tell you why that is right now. In fact, Jordan Peterson will tell you.
Went out of his way to make the workforce within that company 50-50 as much as he could in terms of men and women being represented. So we're talking about engineers, we're talking about tradespeople, we're talking about in workshops, we're talking at the managerial level.
If you hire 50% women engineers and 50% male engineers, then the women engineers are less qualified because the pool of engineers is lower among women. So you can't hire 50% women engineers without producing a decrement in the quality of the engineers, because the selection pool is too small. You can't do that on a large scale. You might be able to do that in one company. But look, you think about it mathematically. If there's 10 times as many male engineers as there are female engineers, and you insist upon hiring 50-50, then obviously the degree to which the female engineers are proficient cannot be the same as the degree to which the male engineers are proficient. It's mathematically impossible.
So you're saying don't even try?
No. I'm saying something much more specific than that.
And that's what we found in the Royal Air Force. Then you're going to have a smaller pool to select from. So you're not going to get as many women flying military fast jets, aircraft in general being the senior engineers and this sort of thing, unless you have quotas like the Royal Air Force has. And you artificially put a more significant level of incompetence into the higher echelons. That's what you're doing. And that will manifest itself all the way down, of course. You'll get these virtue signaling people that rise to the top, and they will promote, and they'll be promoting people who are not as competent as you should be in these traditional high safety roles. We'll leave us now, guys. The FAA then diversity push included focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. Can you believe it? That's actually something that happened. And everyone starts stepping away, don't they, from this? It's so cowardly. Now that Trump's come in, they've gone, yeah, we're going to not do this anymore. We're not going to do net zero. We're not going to do any kind of woke investing. Meta, Amazon, disgraceful companies. We all still use them, of course, as well. He backed down, didn't he? Zuckerberg backed down as soon as Trump got in. He's like, oh, yeah, we're not doing diversity anymore, mate. No, none of that, none of that. Google, exactly the same. They're all backing away from it because they knew it was a scam. And also they knew they promoted the wrong people to the top, and it's costing them a lot of money. We've even seen it in our Navy. DI fanatics. Royal Navy allows officers to wear cultural dress and latest push to be inclusive. This is what this is disgrace. Uniform is supposed to be uniform. You cannot come to work in what you want. It's ridiculous. You break down the actual social cohesion. It doesn't matter what race or nationality you are, you have to wear the same thing. It's like putting football players on a football pitch, isn't it? And getting them to wear whatever they feel. It doesn't work. It's not a team anymore. And that's the problem with these people that you've promoted to the top. They think they're doing a good thing, and what they're doing is damaging the very fabric of these organizations that we rely on for our own safety. I'll leave you with a couple of films. This one from Delta on their TikTok. I might have to mute the audio on this, but I'll put the text up beneath it. This came from Endeavour Air. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. Your flight is unmanned today. Imagine if this had been men that were saying this. No women today on this flight, guys. You know what I mean? We should be all right. That's pretty much what they say. They've actually made a film of this as well. So I think we'll leave it there. It's a typical example, isn't it? If you want to fuck around, you're going to find out. And all I want to say is, guys, just don't get yourself into companies that promote this kind of thing. I wouldn't fly on an airline like this until they backpedal somewhat on the promotion of fewer competent people. It's not incompetence. It's just these people cannot be as competent if you're selecting from a smaller pool. as Peterson says. Guys, I'm interested in your comments on this. I'm not sensationalizing it. I think it's very serious because, of course, our families or ourselves could have been on these airplanes. Hopefully, diversity is ending. But one thing I want to say to you is I want you to remember what's happened during this period, how easy it can happen. We have to speak honestly and sensibly to people. If you are on social media, consider making your name your handle as opposed to Stevie Boy 44. Stand by the words you say. And I know it may it's not going to risk your job. I know you think it is, but it won't do if you're sensible about what you say, okay? And you don't bring your company into disrepute. We don't need to do that, but we need to be men about this, or women, of course, and we need to make sure that our governments know that we're not going to backpedal on this, especially if you're an Englishman on English land. We're never going to give this up. I understand that. You understand it. It's how it is, guys. Fitness, family, finance, and fuel. You know how I roll, all right? Hey, appreciate it. Until next time, Tim Davies, Fast Jet Performance.